OK. So, bonjour tout le monde. Je suis Pamela Isfeld, la présidente de l'APASE. Je vous souhaite la bienvenue au déjeuner de l'APASE avec l'équipe d'Ombuds, with Robert Sinclair, Danielle Campeau, and Alain Caron. We will be able to take questions and comments dans la langue de votre choix. So don't hesitate to pose questions or use the language of your choice. Before we get started, I would just like to acknowledge that I am chairing this meeting from the unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people. I acknowledge them as the past, present, and future guardians and caretakers of these lands. And I encourage all of you where you are to pause for a moment and think about where you're joining us from and what that means. So before we get started, I just wanted to welcome our panel. I have known them all now in my well, I've known them all, I think, from before.
Don't say how long, Pam, please.
No, please. I mean, I'm at the point now where, you look at your CV and your thing on LinkedIn, and it's like you're thinking like what you can cut off your experience. Do I have to tell them that I was there? Because that was really a long time ago. But yeah, we've known each other. Rob and I have known each other for quite a long time. I think I've known Danielle for almost as long, and Alain as well. But I really got to know them all in my capacity, not so much as partly as an officer and a deputy director at Foreign Affairs, and then GAC, and then as president of PAFSO, but also as in my capacity as the employee co-champion for psychological well-being, where we've been working together on various things, including the strategy on psychological well-being. And I mean, to start off, I'm really happy, in that capacity and as president of PAFSO to see this Ombud office up and running, because I know it's been something that we have been, we've been thinking that we need for quite a long time. There's been a lot of discussion. I think it was under discussion back in 2009 when I was president of PAFSO before, and now it's come to fruition. So, that's important. And I think it's really going to make a difference to the way these issues are handled and dealt with at GAC. And I can't think of a better team to be taking all of this forward. So what I'll do is Rob is going to has some slides he's going to run through. I will watch the Q&A box and the chat for questions, but we will take them at the end unless they're obviously a sort of a hot pursuit. So I'm in charge of the slides, and I will Rob, I will turn over to you, and I will advance to the next slide. Does that sound good?
That's perfect, Pam, and thanks so much for hosting this event and for being such a great partner in all that we're doing. And this kind of event, it speaks to the importance that we attach to these sorts of constructive engagements. Bargaining agents have a really critical role to play in our wellness ecosystem. So on a formal level, this kind of reach out and cooperation is really important. And on an informal basis as well, these kinds of relationships are really important. And of course, you've already introduced Danielle and Alain, who I'd also like to thank for all of their contributions to bringing this big Ombud project forward. I thought before I begin, I'd give you a quick outline of what I'll cover in my remarks. Je vais d'abord vous donner un aperçu de la scène, quelques informations sur la fonction et la structure de l'Ombud. Ensuite, j'aborderai ce que l'Ombud fera et ne fera pas, ce qui est assez important à comprendre. Je ferai également une mise à jour rapide sur ce qui a changé dans l'écosystème du bien-être à la suite de la création du rôle de Ombud. Et puis, J'aborderai ensuite les principes directeurs qui sous-tendent la fonction de l'Ombud et je vais conclure par quelques remarques sur la gestion des défis et des attentes. So you'll likely have seen the deputy's broadcast message about a little bit more than a month ago now, announcing that the Ombud function is operational. So I won't repeat it here. My bureau, or the bureau that I represent, will now have two functions: mission inspections and Ombud services. I'm not going to speak to this slide per se. Hopefully, while I've been talking, you've been able to read and digest some of the key things and capacities that we're going to do. But maybe, Pam, we could go to the next slide, because I think this next slide gives a good visual for people to follow. So as I just noted, the ZID, as we're called, will have two functions: mission inspections and Ombud services. On the Ombud side, on the right-hand side of that's diapo, you'll see that the Ombud is supported by three pillars: EAP, Employee Assistance Program, ICMS, Informal Conflict Management System, and Support Services. So the third pillar will comprise a couple of intake officers, an LES contact point in recognition of the important role that our LES play in our success, a data analyst position, and a reporting position that will help draft an annual report to deputies, as well as other reports that will be available to all staff. In terms of key functions that the office will play, USS's blog as well summed it up pretty well. Les employés et les gestionnaires disposent désormais d'un espace sûr pour aborder en toute confiance tout type de problème personnel ou relatif au milieu de travail qui affecte leur bien-être et pour recevoir des informations sur les options permettant de résoudre le problème en question. Ce nouveau bureau a été conçu comme une sorte de guichet unique permettant à tous les employés ayant des préoccupations à cet égard de savoir plus facilement à qui s'adresser. Donc, autrement dit, on sera une unité où tous les employés peuvent aller pour obtenir des renseignements sur les mécanismes et les processus par lesquels ils peuvent résoudre des problèmes de mieux-être liés au lieu de travail. Having said that, I also want to sound a note of caution on how we describe the role. We have to be very disciplined in how we cast the office, and even internally within the bureau, we catch ourselves still sometimes. It's very easy to unintentionally characterize the Ombud role as being a one-stop shop where people can go to resolve their problems. That's not what we do. We're not a post box for formal complaints. Rather, we provide guidance. So while our counselors and our intake officers and everyone in the office will in various ways support individuals to help them navigate our systems, we will not advocate on individual cases. This would be contrary to the principles of impartiality and neutrality, which are pretty fundamental to the concept of an Ombud role, and in the long run would be corrosive to confidence in the office. And perhaps, Pam, we could pull up those principles in the next slide there. There you have them. However, cependant, lorsque nous décernerons des problèmes ou des tendances plus larges qui affectent le bien-être de nos employés sur le lieu de travail, nous en ferons rapport. Donc, en ce sens, nous plaiderons pour le bien-être général de notre peuple. So you see here the guiding principles that underpin our work. They are confidentiality and informality, impartiality and neutrality, and independence. Independence, as you can see, the position reports directly to DMA. So reporting to a deputy minister is pretty much the highest level of independence that we can attain within the bureaucracy without reporting to Parliament. Confidentiality, if somebody comes to us, we won't, for Ombuds support, we won't even confirm or deny that we've actually spoken to someone. That confidentiality guarantee is ironclad. Neutrality, impartiality, I've already spoken to. And informality, I strongly believe that informal approaches almost always result in better outcomes than formal recourse mechanisms. A couple of words on how I see these principles affecting the relationship between the Bureau writ large and the department. First, on inspections, I see it largely as status quo. External governance on inspections will remain largely as is. We continue to work on refining our internal working, our principles, if you will, on inspections, but it's largely status quo on that side. On the Ombuds side, there'll be necessary distanciation or formal arm's length distancing from corporate functions, while we continue to play a constructive role behind the scenes. For instance, in terms of Ombuds work, we won't report to CMC or in a kind of reporting relationship. We'll consult with CMC, and you've heard me refer to an annual report that we'll produce that will be available to everyone. I see that as excellent grist for the mill, if you will, for CMC to inform CMC's work after we've produced the report. I'll continue to sit on CMC in my individual capacity. I think it's important for my position to continue to do so, to have an insight into what topics the department is looking at, and CMC has a role to play on psychological health and safety as well. So I see that very much as a symbiotic relationship in many regards. In terms of what else has changed, and at the risk of, perhaps we could move on to the next slide. It's a pretty busy slide. This is a bit of a schematic of the wellness ecosystem, if you will. In terms of what's changed in the ZID world, in a nutshell, in order to conform with those guiding principles that we already touched on, all investigative functions for which ZID used to have responsibility, so that's for breaches of the codes of values and ethics, that includes code of conduct abroad, special investigations, those internal fraud investigations, and whistleblower investigations, or PSDPA investigations. Those have been transferred to other bureaus. HWD is now responsible for the Values and Ethics Code, including for providing a conflict of interest advice, as well as investigations of breaches of the codes. And our Chief Audit Executive, or VBB, is now responsible for special investigations and whistleblower or PSDPA investigations. So you can see that the blue text on this schematic, it denotes where responsibilities have changed. So with all that as background, to wrap up, a couple of just final words. The role will evolve over time. We're on a journey. We'll continue to be informed by discussions such as the one we're having this morning. Key challenges that I do want to touch on are, first, expectations management. We've just opened, and we're staffing up some additional positions. As well, culture change has to happen at an organizational level. So as with all new things, it's great to point to something new, but I also want to stress that our office, as great as Danielle, Alain, and all our people are, we're not going to be able to solve anything, nor should we everything, nor should we be looked at to as a panacea. It's the line managers that have the primordial, if you will, responsibility for wellness in the department. We'll be there to support managers in that, as well as employees. But we're not, as I said, a panacea, and we're in it to support others on this journey that we're all taking together. So with that, Pam, maybe I can turn it over to Danielle pour voir si tu as d'autres commentaires à ajouter, et j'aimerais juste ajouter, if I'm looking here and there, it's because I've got some technical difficulties, and to actually see people, I've got to look at another screen. So I'm really trying to ignore this other screen and focus on the camera. So apologies if I look a little frazzled. Anyway, Danielle, Alain, si vous avez d'autres choses à soulever, nuancer, à vous la parole.
Merci, Rob, and thank you very much, Pam, for the invitation. I have to say that I find that you've been a very engaged and committed co-champion on psychological health. It's always been a pleasure to work with you. My perspective on the new Office of the Wellbeing Ombud, I think, is that it represents continuity and also change. And continuity in the sense that there are three fundamental pillars that are part of the new Office of the Wellbeing Ombud: the inspections team, the employee assistance program, and the informal conflict management unit that you all know very well, I will infer. And so when senior management decided to create the Office of the Ombud, they were, I think, very adamant that these three units should be together. And I think part of it was a recognition of the work that these units do and their contribution to the well-being ecosystem of the whole department. What is new, what represents change, is the fact that now we will be reporting formally on systemic issues, and we will be publishing, yes, an annual report that will be accessible to all. We also will have a LES contact point, which I think is a welcome and important added feature of all our suite of services.
Excellent, thanks. Alain, did you want to chime in? Do you have anything to add?
I already joined in, like I'm listening. No, I would just, je répéterais des choses si c'était à faire, mais non, moi je...
Sorry, I don't want to put you on the spot.
Okay, I don't mind.
Pam, maybe I could just jump in to supplement what Danielle said about continuity and change. I really want to stress, to be frank, there's there can be a certain level of reality checks on new initiatives that the department often undertakes, where something new is being undertaken, but really people think, oh, this is just repurposing and we're just kind of moving things around.
Shuffling the deck chairs.
Yeah, yeah. So, but I just want to underline that senior management, and not just deputies, but ADMs as well in the duty of care community, are putting their money where their mouth is on this initiative. Like, this is not just window dressing. We've sought and received 6.8 million in new resources over the next 3 years to augment our EAP and ICMS counseling capacities. That's new people, as well as to support that, staff up that third pillar of support services within the Ombuds office. So particularly in the current environment, that's a significant commitment. And so when I spoke about expectations management and staffing up, it's a nice challenge to have, have additional resources to bring people on board to build out our reach in this area. So I just wanted to put that marker down as well. I think it's an important point.
Yeah, no, that's very significant. And, you know, honestly, I mean, I take your point, Danielle, about like continuity and change. I mean, it's not like there haven't been parts of the department that have been working very well on these issues, right? But I think that a big part of the problem is that knitting everything together and, you know, being able to make sure that we benefit from the knowledge that we gain on different things, you know? And I mean, I'm hoping that this will work very well with the co-champion system as well, where, you know, you have somebody from a bargaining agent who's currently me, may not always be me, and then someone from the employer side. And working with you guys, we can kind of bring the knowledge that we get to get a sort of a holistic picture of what's going on for things that may not be reported, right? Like, I mean, I hear from managers, from EXs as employees in a way that I wouldn't know about if I were just the president of PAFSO, you know, so that helps give me a sort of a better picture. And I hope, you know, I think that this will help us all pull all of these things together. And also, I'm really happy that there is the dimension of addressing systemic issues, because, you know, this has been one of my things since I took on the co-champion portfolio in, what was it, like 2018, I think, toward 2019, I guess. When we first started all of this, was, well, you know, listen, like, it's great to talk about resilience, and it's great to talk about, you know, individual coping and counseling and so on and so forth. And we absolutely need that. Like that, you know, whenever I talk to anybody, that's always the part that I say, look, this is the part that you can work on yourself directly. But at the same time, I think, you know, we have to acknowledge that sometimes the problem is not in the person's individual psyche so much as in their circumstances, you know? Like during COVID, we had, especially, you know, our MCO community, where people had gone for 6 months or longer without a single day truly off.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, if that person is starting to experience burnout and, you know, exhaustion, and maybe even like, you know, inability to like keep their mouth shut when they really should, that's not that person that needs some kind of a prescription or individual counseling. I mean, that person needs less work and a break, you know, and we need to address these kinds of things, you know, systematic understaffing, you know, management culture that puts those expectations on people. And so I'm really glad that there is the dimension of that to the office. I'm just looking, I'm not seeing any questions or any raised hands or chat. So I just want to encourage our audience to come forward. I mean, there is an anonymous ability to share a question anonymously if people want, and I will just read out the question for the panel to ask. But maybe to kick us off, could I just ask, so with your new system, what's the path? Like, say I'm an employee, I'm 5 or 6 years in, I'm like, maybe I'm a senior FS2, I'm on my first or second posting, and I feel like my ambassador really doesn't like me, and that I'm experiencing behavior that I think is really not fair. I'm having trouble getting my vacation approved. I feel like I'm overly criticized in meetings. Maybe I'm excluded from things that I feel like should be in my job. There's just a package of, stuff. I've tried to address it. I've tried to say, hey, I don't, and the person sort of denies that there is a problem. If I were to come to you with that, like as that person, what would be the path for my issue? How would that be? How could the Ombuds office help me? Or could they? Could you?
So, thanks, Pam. So first off, the first step would be to reach out and contact the office, which by email is ombud@international.gc.ca, and our intake officers would provide some initial advice, but connect you with one of our counselors, such as Alain, who can coach on in the first instance on having difficult conversations, for instance. And so perhaps Alain, je peux te mettre sur la sellette to speak a little bit about how you would help an individual in those circumstances and help them navigate the system, because a lot of what we do and would do is, what's the outcome or result that people are looking for, and depending on that, we can show there's door number 1, 2, 3, 4, and these are the doors that you can open, with the emphasis on informal approaches, as I said, almost always producing better outcomes than formal, and that is the raison d'être for Alain and the ICMS team. Mais avec ça, Alain, peut-être à toi et à Daniel pour répondre en plus de détails.
Ben, pour nous, la première chose qu'on va faire, c'est vous aider à comprendre c'est quoi la situation. Donc, avant même de vous suggérer des pistes ou quoi que ce soit, là, une bonne partie de notre travail, c'est juste d'être un point de contact, un point de référence, une oreille pour vous aider à juste exprimer un peu ce que vous ressentez. Ben, c'est beaucoup dans le but d'essayer de vous comprendre, mais c'est quoi la situation dans laquelle je suis. Puis, est-ce que je veux faire quelque chose? Puis ça, c'est volontaire. If you don't want to do anything, you don't do anything. But it's going to be my job to help you understand that if you don't do anything, the problem will just become bigger and bigger. And if that person, the head of mission or whatsoever, is developing skills that are really helpful for him or her, but not for anybody around, well, he's going to or she's going to be using those skills even better later, and try to break that in 5 years is going to be difficult. Donc, le premier rôle qu'on a, c'est de vous aider à comprendre un peu, c'est quoi la situation dans laquelle je me trouve, puis qu'est-ce que je peux faire, c'est quoi mes différentes options. Mais, puis sinon, on rencontre quoi, en février, c'est à peu près 150 dossiers, là. Il y a une bonne partie de ces dossiers-là, c'est exactement ces situations-là, que ce soit avec mon collègue, que ce soit avec mon employé, que ce soit avec mon gestionnaire, que ce soit mon gestionnaire, ça peut être un DG, ça peut être un superviseur, ça peut être un chef de mission. C'est de vous aider à essayer de voir comment est-ce que je peux faire évoluer cette situation-là. Puis très souvent, très souvent, the objective is to make the other person aware of, well, what is the impact that you have on the situation? Like, the last thing you want to have is an MCO or an FPDS, whatever, who does not help you with your problems. You're there to do your job, and you're there to do this so that that person is doing the best that they can. Donc, de faire reconnaître à l'autre personne c'est quoi l'impact qu'ils ont sur la situation. Ça, c'est ou bien en dialoguant directement avec cette personne-là. Donc, une bonne partie de notre travail, c'est juste de vous coacher, essayer de voir comment est-ce que je peux m'engager dans une conversation comme celle-là qui va nous aider de passer de A à B, trouver des solutions, puis trouver des stratégies pour faire de sorte que dans l'avenir, on ne va pas être là. Si jamais ça ne fonctionne pas, la deuxième option, le deuxième niveau, c'est peut-être que moi, je peux parler au chef de mission. Peut-être que tu peux engager le chef de mission ou le gestionnaire, peu importe, là, dans un dialogue puis avec moi pour essayer de voir si lui, il y a un problème avec son employé, peut-être qu'il a besoin d'un coup de main aussi pour le gérer. Donc, de pouvoir engager des dialogues aussi avec l'autre partie, souvent sous l'initiative de si moi j'ai un problème avec Daniel, je reviens à ça. Mon rôle, ça va être d'aller voir Daniel en disant Daniel, peux-tu t'aider là, parce que là, moi, ça ne marche pas. Est-ce qu'on peut réussir à faire quelque chose? Le rôle que je peux avoir, ça peut aussi être un rôle de médiateur, essayer de fournir un milieu, un environnement sécuritaire pour pouvoir avoir une discussion comme celle-là. Puis éventuellement, il y a une bonne partie de mon travail qui, lorsqu'on a cette conversation-là, j'ai déjà une bonne confiance de ce que c'est parce que j'ai coaché un et j'ai coaché l'autre à avoir cette conversation-là parce que les deux veulent faire une bonne chose. Les deux veulent, je dis tout le temps ça, les gens qui vont en poste ou le jour où je prends ma retraite, je veux faire partie du party de ma retraite. Je veux pas être exclu de mon party. C'est la même chose pour les gens en affectation. Tout le monde veut être une bonne personne, avoir une bonne réputation, mais de pouvoir coacher ou aider les deux parties à essayer de voir comment est-ce qu'on peut trouver une façon de travailler qui va être saine et sécuritaire, au moins pour le temps qu'il nous reste à travailler ensemble. And if that does not happen, if the head of mission does not want to listen, and I see that that creates a problem, well, I have no problem going to the DG and to going over. We rarely, very rarely have to do that. But if that's a way of starting a conversation, making sure that things are going to be settled, good. And if that doesn't work, if the conditions are so that, well, that looks more like harassment and that's the only thing that's going to be pushing a button that's going to be doing so that something is going to happen, which normally is having management react, well, we can use that as well. But I'd say that is not something that we often have as a strategy because I'd say 90% of the time, the first level of interventions, which is, well, just having people made aware of there's a problem and we have to discuss it, normally works. So, ça fait maintenant 18 ans qu'on fait ça. Là. Je sais pas si I'm not that dumb. I do it because it's working. It is.
That's good. No, and honestly, in my experience, what I've seen is a lot of times, I think that people just don't understand the impact that they're having, especially if they're new managers, and new homs. Like they just don't. It's like it's just me. I just made that comment. It's just me. I made a joke. I made a, and they don't realize that when they're in this role, especially at mission where you have such power over somebody's life, right? And and people's focus is often like much more narrow and hyper focused on the office and on their identity as a diplomat. I think like a good part of the time people just don't realize. But I'm really glad to hear you say that you can sort of can speak to the manager and then if necessary go to the manager's manager, right, the DG. But in the presentation you did say that the Ombuds office won't advocate for individual employees. So can we just clarify like what that nuance is between the type of intervention that you would make and what you would see as advocating? And I mean, I don't see the people from my staff from the PAFSO office here, but I know that like our labor relations guy would be like, hey, y'all got to be careful that, if you're getting into the area of like labor relations and, complaints and things like that, that's the role of the bargaining agents and so on. So could you just explain what the difference is between that?
Well, reaching out is not necessarily advocating for something. There's the situation here and no one really wants to talk about it and something has to be done. So I'm not necessarily advocating for somebody, but for a situation. There's something that has to change. Like the climate is like they're talking, everybody's talking about it.
There's a problem. Yeah.
There is a problem and somebody has to know that. And that's where we rarely have to do it, because that when you manage a team, you want the team to be productive and to be good and to feel safe to certain ways, so they can be productive. So it's more raising awareness than advocating.
Okay. Yeah, because very few people go into the office and say, I want my staff, I want everyone I work with every day to hate me. You know, it's like, hey, I see that we've got a couple of questions and comments. I see the first one is thank you for your dedication from Marie and efforts to build a healthy working environment. You have an ambitious mandate and wondering what are the powers and authorities of the Ombuds office? So like going back to our example, say, what if you can't get anywhere with this person? Like, do you guys have any, are there any hard mechanisms that could be done, you know, to enforce better behavior by somebody? Or, you know, alternatively, if it's an employee who's doing that, because employees can also harass their managers and create bad atmosphere as well, you know? So I will step back.
So in terms of our powers, if you will, I would say that the biggest power that we have, and it's one that we have to use very judiciously, is that of the, pardon the expression, the bully pulpit. You know, the annual report and saying, you know, flagging issues and saying, hey, department and management, these are systemic issues that we've identified that need to be addressed. As well, raising awareness, as we've just discussed, Pam, you know, raising awareness amongst individuals about the impact of their actions and their statements on others through outreach, various training modules. Danielle and Alain and the team does significant outreach and training across a gamut of issues as well. So at the first level, there's that. As we've just discussed, we don't formally advocate on particular individual cases, but we can support people, as I said, on their own journeys. If it gets to the point of accessing formal recourses, there's the EAP and ICMS behind the scenes can coach people individually about their own well-being, but also, as Alain has already laid out, how to have those difficult conversations, and also to flag, hey, without advocating for one side or another per se, hey, management, you've got a situation here, you need to address it.
Yeah, so you're advocating for a solution, not for an individual necessarily.
Exactly. And you know, when I call people or look to speak to people, you can kind of see this kind of look come over their faces. Oh, okay, I'm listening, I'm paying attention. They pay attention. They pay attention. I have no problem getting access to people because they know when I call or Danielle or Alain call, we're talking about something serious, and they need to pay attention, and it's in their best interests to pay attention and to engage and work on the situation. Now, and then I'd say, you know, one of our other powers, it's not a formal power, it's again, pardon the expression, soft power, is the work we do behind the scenes. and the confidence building that we undertake behind the scenes. Like we don't get into this work to have the spotlight and say, look at us, we're so great that we solved this situation. No, the best resolution is when the two sides get together and they feel like they've owned it and they've succeeded in resolving the situation, not an imposed solution. Imposed solutions, I don't think generally work very well. So those are some of the powers and skills that we bring to the situations. But Alain, Daniel, voulez-vous ajouter quelque chose?
Well, I think in a way, rather than advocating for individuals, we advocate for an idea, a principle is for, to maintain psychologically healthy and safe workplaces. This is
yeah, no, that makes sense. I just want to sort of, I'd just like to have come away with an understanding of like what they could really expect. And one of the things that I have said to people, when I hear from people in their capacity, and sometimes it doesn't go over well, is, hey, listen, like if you're going to do, informal discussion, or you have to be prepared to listen to the other side of things, and you have to be prepared to listen to how your behavior may be affecting your manager as a human, and also how your manager's perception might be that your behavior might be affecting the work unit. And, and sometimes people are ready and willing to engage in that and to look at their part, and sometimes they're not. And so I think it's important that when people come to this process, that they realize that, it's not going to be like I squeal on my boss and, something bad happens and that person is removed from the mission. Like that's not generally how it works. Although I assume, like, if you guys hear about things that rise to the level of, serious wrongdoing, criminal behavior, assault of some one kind or another, that you have like that gets reported to a different chain and that's dealt with as a crime or a severe violation, right? That's how that would go. Yeah. So it's not, it wouldn't be you guys necessarily who do that. It would be the other part of the system. Yeah. Okay. And sorry, I'm going to put words in your mouth there, Rob.
No, it's fine. That's fine. That's all good. And I also want to, I also want to emphasize that I have a regular bilat with DMA to whom I report. And the deputies are, I really want to stress, they are seriously committed to these issues. And I flag systemic issues and our perceptions. I'm informed by my team and other inputs, like our discussions, like that from this. They're all ears. And so there's those informal connections as well, which influence outcomes as well, that I also want to stress. So when I say bully pulpit, that kind of, I think, it was a bit of an unfair characterization that it's, just finger wagging. It's more just raising awareness of issues that I think is a more constructive way to frame the response.
Yeah, and the level of access I think that this team has, I think it's changed from what I have seen, just as I've seen these issues evolve, and that things are being taken more seriously by what I could see at the deputy minister level. I won't go on about that point because I have views that are probably well known about like kind of how long did that have to take, but the best time to plant a tree and all that, right? It's like It might have been 20 years
Yes.
ago. Second best time is today. That kind of leads me into our next comment here that came up, anonymous comment. Our new DM published a blog post where he basically said that he'd rely on corridor reputation when hiring good managers. That didn't sit well. One of our problems in GAC is the corridor reputation. I would love to see 360s done on our superiors. I mean, I would too, I think, as a systematic thing, you know, but I think it's, you know, there, like, it's something that needs a lot of thought, because corridor reputation can cut both ways, right? Mm-hmm. You know, someone can have a very good corridor reputation for the wrong things that may not make them somebody that people want to work with, but make them somebody that senior management wants to put in a position, and vice versa. You know, someone could be an excellent manager, take care of their staff, you know, have good sort of work-life balance, but, oh, you know, is that person delivering? I mean, how do you guys have any comments on that? What can we do about that kind of culture? And Rob, I know I say this at every presentation that Rob and I are at, like, we need to address the fear of reprisal. Yes, absolutely. But in order to do that, I think we have to address the fact of reprisal. You know, we've seen situations where we know that people have, I mean, there have been a couple documented recently, you know, the Office of the Integrity Commissioner, there was a recent PSLRB decision that talked about, you know, someone who displeased a senior manager and had a competition, you know, had a promotion taken away, or a transfer taken away. Like, those are concrete examples of things happening in response to somebody not towing the line. And that, I think, is part of GAC's culture that is slowly being addressed, but not, you know, what can we do to change that? And are 360s the answer?
Okay, so there's a few elements in this in this line of questioning. On the promoting people based on corridor reputation, you know, I don't have USS's blog in front of me, so I can't really get into a line-by-line analysis of it, but I think that promotions are not going to be based solely on corridor reputation, and I think the spirit of the comment may have been that they want to ensure that they have a really well-rounded, informed view of an executive and their competencies and behaviors before, as part of the promotion process. But I'm pretty confident that they would not want to promote people solely based on corridor reputation. In terms of the question of the fear of reprisal and addressing reprisal, I guess, yes, that's an important issue. We, global affairs has traditionally scored several percentage points lower, if you will, or worse, to be clear, than the public service writ large on issues around reprisal. You know, it's certainly one of the issues that we're going to be focusing on as an office, how the extent of that and how we can address it. And it goes to one of my key points, and you think after however many decades or hundreds of, 100 years of existence, the Department of Foreign Affairs, Global Affairs would have figured out rotationality and its impacts on our HR systems. And I do think that rotationality, we still have to work on mitigating the impacts of rotationality on our systems and the way we manage. And so, because too often we hear, I'll just keep my head down, until the person moves on, or the manager, conversely, I don't want to touch that. I'll leave it to the next person. And neither of those produce great outcomes for both individuals and for systems. And I think accentuate the whole basket of issues and sentiments around reprisal and perceptions around reprisal. One of the issues around how can I say, reassuring people that reprisal is taken seriously and dealt with seriously is the whole privacy question of when it happens and there's some kind of a disciplinary process, it frankly goes into a little the privacy black box, right? And we can't comment on what kind of discipline has been imposed on someone who has been shown to have acted in reprisal, and therein I would point back to what USS has talked about in terms of trying to create a dashboard showing at a systemic level the actions and the disciplinary processes that are being undertaken each year. So raising up the level of information, that can be provided to people to I think reassure them that things are dealt with when they're brought to the attention.
Yeah.
Now, Alain has spoke to this a little bit in his remarks as well. People have to. We've still got a lot of work to do to reassure people about taking that step forward to put up their hands and say, "Hey, there's an issue here," and that they will be supported and protected. And often, I think the perception and the fear is in those situations is greater than what the reality in terms of the reaction that people get. And we're a very hierarchical organization as well. And so people are like, oh, do I want to raise something with, this person is, 1.25 levels higher than me, that's a big chasm to overcome and raise. I think that plays into this whole fear of reprisal issue as well. And I hope over time that certainly in these areas we can become less vertical and more horizontal in our approach. Mais Alain et Daniel, je suis sûr que vous avez d'autres choses à ajouter à ce point.
Could I just jump in quickly? I have my eye on the clock and it's 10 o'clock. So normally, we book these for an hour. So if anyone needs to leave, you're not being rude if you leave, but I can stay for a while. We've still got a few questions to go through. So if you guys are willing to stay and keep talking, we'll keep recording. And I think we're having a good discussion. So over to you, Danielle, and then Alain, did you want to add to what Rob said?
Vas-y, Alain.
Oui, moi je dis ça depuis des années, là, je suis beaucoup à la recherche d'exemples de retaliation when things are done informally, and I think, well, when you do try to engage somebody in a conversation to do so that, hey, this was not fun, can we do it differently? It's going to be better for you and better for me. Normally people do engage in that, and if they feel that there's a threat for them on something that is done informally, well, I'd be curious to know exactly what that is. They tend to react badly. Human beings tend to react badly when they feel threatened by something, and will react if you say during a conversation like this one, what you just said does not make any sense or whatever. I might take it personally, and maybe the next time you want to help, or maybe I'm not going to be putting you on the top of my list. But when it's done one-on-one, when it's done at that level with sound of threat, I'm still waiting to hear of those. But most of the time, things,
that's good news. Like,
I think can be raised in a way in which, hey, it's not, as I said, like, there's this whole thing of like, it's not good for you and it's not good for me. And but in a mission not too long ago where the was an LES employee, I can't remember exactly what minus 2-3 levels was towards the hum, and the head of mission had done something that had an impact on her, and she said, well, I can't say that to the hum. So, well, why can't you say that to the hum? I'm sure she certainly didn't want to put you in a situation in which you look bad, and if you say it, be careful on how you say it, because you might trigger some
you don't want to get them defensive
to the other person, because she certainly did not want to be mean. And so why not? Like, she has more authority than you. It does not have any more power. Like, that you can't abuse that. So she's a human being as well. So why, even if you're the gardener, you have a right. You can raise that to the head of mission or to the spouse or whatever, to do so that, hey, can we do things differently? Like, it most of the time, I'm still waiting for stories of, yeah, that went bad after. And I've been doing this for 18 years.
Excellent. Can I ask, do you do any follow-up? Like, after you do an intervention, an informal discussion or whatever, do you do any follow-up, like 6 months, a year later, to say, like, hey, were there long-term effects? Did this, result in an ongoing improvement? Because if we don't, like, I think that would be something that might be useful to track, ask people if they'd be willing to be interviewed a year later or whatever, on what the effects of that discussion was. Because I think, honestly, if people had that information that you just shared about, that you have not actually seen these things result in a bad situation, or, you've seen positive change, I think that would be encouraging to people.
I think we'd love to be able to do that systematically. We do it regularly with some cases. For other, we can't do it for everybody. And in some cases, like, it's not, it's just resolved and that's it. But I'd say, I can't have the number right now, but I think a third of people that we meet, maybe 40% of the people that we meet, have already used the service in the past. So it gives me the sign that people kind of see that, well, yeah, there are certain things that are working because they're coming back. So we try to, but not systematically. It would be great to do. But
I know data analysis is one of your asks, right? One of the things you're going to hire for. So yeah.
And Pam, maybe on this point, I'd also jump in as well to riff off of what Alain has said. I also think we have a culture of positive feedback. Given the milieu in which we work, it's a culture of conflict avoidance often, which means that we don't have direct conversations about difficult issues to the extent to which we should. So this unspoken fears, and people have to read through the tea leaves sometimes on their PSPMs and their annual feedback, and that will take time to address. And you hear that from the deputies. Recently, they're making a real push on executives giving honest, real feedback on performance evaluations. And I think that feeds into this whole fear of reprisal, because if somebody has never had honest, direct feedback, hey, you're doing this, but it could be done much better, or a different way. They've never gotten that feedback to suddenly get some direct feedback. It provokes a bit of a reaction. So we need to be strategic and give people the tools to have those sorts of conversations. And it'll take us a while to change the course of the ship on these kinds of things.
Just jumping in, I mean, that's the good point, that fear of reprisal can work both ways, right? Like if you're a team leader and, you know, maybe you're younger than your team, maybe you're less experienced, maybe you're a woman or visible minority, or you feel vulnerable, or you just feel vulnerable for whatever reason. And you have to criticize, you know, a senior team member, like often happens in missions, you know, maybe a senior LES or someone, you know, with a lot of knowledge. Well, you know, I've heard plenty of managers say that those people have then, you know, kind of turned on them and undermined them, and that's reprisal too. You know, that's
Yep.
reprisal too. I just wanted to add, before we go to the next question, which follows well from this, I think, you know, I think it's important, and I know you're looking at your hiring, but I do think it's important to have diversity in your team. And the people who are hearing things. Like I had an experience at my executive committee where we were talking about exactly this. And this is my personal theory about what is wrong with a lot of GAC culture, is that it's passive aggressive in many ways, right? People don't speak openly, and so issues fester, and, you know, there's not much yelling and so on and so forth. And I was going on about this, and then I noticed that the visible minority members of the group were kind of looking at each other, and then, you know, a couple of hands went up and they're like, you don't see a lot of yelling? I see a lot of yelling. And 3 or 4 people put up their hands and said, yeah, that they had regularly experienced, you know, being yelled at, being raised voices. And honestly, that is not something that has really happened to me in my career. Partly, I think, because they know I'd yell back. You know, like I mean, I'm not, you know, I'm not likely to take that kind of stuff, especially lately, you know. But it made me realize that, you know, the experiences, the way we're seeing things, like really might be different for different people. So I think that that's an important dimension, you know, of what we're looking at. Maybe I just could go on. This gives you guys a chance to brag about the stuff that you're doing training wise and everything. The next comment says, Danielle shared some stats back in 2021 that listed all sorts of issues such as marriage breakups, anxiety, burnout, and disillusionment and dissatisfaction with GAC. So the awareness is excellent. Now, how do we tackle these issues? One small step was a pilot offered to employees to learn about mental health first aid. That course was an eye-opener, and I look forward to other solutions that will make our working lives better, and that someday the next public servants poll ranks GAC higher than the 61st slot. Yes, we do. I mean, we've done other things. We did, there's bystander intervention training that was co-sponsored by PAFSO and then DMA and now CFSI. There's quite a few things going on the training front and resource front. And maybe I will give you guys a chance to talk about those if you like.
Maybe I'll jump in and then I'll toss it quickly to Danielle and Alain. First off, I'd point to the work that Alain is leading on pulling together psychological health and safety strategy and action plan. There's a lot going on across the department, but it's very balkanized. And the idea of the strategy is to pull it together, establish a framework so that we can bring some coherence to everything that's being done and broader awareness to it. So that's certainly one avenue on which we're working to improve people's overall psychological wellness. As well, you know, at the outset of this discussion, I mentioned the new resources that we're looking to invest in and to staff up, and that's to try, you know, fundamentally that's to try to move us from a reactive to a proactive approach, a preventive approach, particularly focused on, for instance, where we're sending people to hardship missions, that we bolster their resilience before they go, while they're in a hardship mission, and when they come back. And so there's a continuum of support that's provided. But I should say, not just for hardship missions, but other difficult situations, for instance, when we stand up the ops center to respond to whatever crisis is going on in the world, people here get, stressed as well. And so it's to also help provide some supports in that regard. But Danielle, peut-être que veux-tu ajouter quelque chose sur cette question?
Oui, ben en fait, sur cette question et peut-être là sur le commentaire suivant, je dirais il y a un des projets les plus ambitieux auxquels nous voulons nous attabler, c'est la formation et l'appui aux gens qui vont dans des missions à haut risque et la formation nécessaire qu'on juge nécessaire ou adéquate pour les préparer à non seulement travailler, mais à vivre dans des missions à haut risque. Donc, this training involves, of course, psychological preparation, resilience building and consolidation, but also how to manage conflict, how to manage relationships in missions where, often small missions or missions where people live essentially in a bubble. And so they work with individuals, they go back to a compound where the same individuals are their neighbors. So it becomes crucial that people develop competencies to be able to diffuse or to work through conflict. And this is, I'd say we need to emphasize this very, very much in our training. And I go back to one of the comments that was made earlier about the 360. What is the value of 360s? I'd say, well, it is one tool, and ideally this tool should be used in a professional development and learning plan that is almost as long as the career span of individuals that are interested in becoming managers and eventually leaders. And so is the 360 isolated form helpful? Well, we'll have to put in place safeguards so that it is not harmful, because I have seen instances where it did harm more than good. But if it's done in the course of a long track or a professional development lifespan, then I think it could be an interesting and good tool. And it should happen sooner rather than later. I go back to your proverb, Pam, when is the best time to plant a tree?
Yes, this is my favorite proverb, my second favorite word. Yeah, one of my favorite ones, because you have to start where you are, right? I get it that, people have a lot of frustration. I personally do as well about, how badly things may have been handled in the past, or, how things were ignored. But, this group is trying to move the needle forward. And it's not going to be overnight,
No. And part of our efforts is to, I think, develop a conflict competent culture. And this requires a lot of resources, energy, and patience. It will happen. It won't happen overnight. And because I think most individuals come into the workplace having learned how to manage conflict by observing what went on in their family. And they don't teach us conflict resolution at university. And so you add the culture of our department. So the problems stem from probably two ways of managing conflict: is either avoiding it or competing, being aggressive, being forceful. And so by developing conflict,
middle ground,
collaborating is something that is learned, that can be learned.
Well, and it's a big topic maybe to get into for another time, but I've talked to you guys about my theories of how we recruit. you know, and how we recruit for certain qualities that come from maybe, you know, not the healthiest of sources, right? Like being very driven at work and being eager to please and really all of that stuff, which can be very, very useful to an employer that wants to get work out of people and what, but is not necessarily lead to a psychologically healthy individual or a workplace, you know, and I think maybe we need to think about some of that. But these are all like long-term issues that we're starting to highlight, to bring out things that have not been discussed before, and starting to think, okay, how can we like address 1% of some of these things? So it's not going to be an overnight kind of thing. We have one more question on the chat, and then somebody with their hand up. So the comment about EAP has been there for a while, so maybe I'll read that one out first, and then I'll go to Lori, and allow her to talk and ask her question. So the anonymous attendee says, very helpful. I wish I knew more about EAP during my last posting, and welcome the Ombuds office, because this will be very helpful and useful if I encounter problems again. New managers don't necessarily get sufficient training before taking on the role, and at least there might be recourse in case of unfortunate behavior going forward. So it's one of the things, like I noticed a couple comments along the lines of, you know, it's line managers that are really responsible for a lot of this. I guess, you know, as a deputy director in my GAC capacity, I kind of feel like, pity the poor line manager here, you know, like, is there any willingness at the systemic level to look at, you know, if we're going to have a better culture and higher expectations of people to be more aware of the psychological well-being of their teams, is there any move to recognize what that's going to mean in terms of resources? Like, if you're expected to be listening to your team members and, you know, spending time really talking to people and so on, that's wonderful, but that's a lot of, that's time, you know, that can be like a whole day per week and if you're stressed to the max on substance and, you know, demands, like, I don't think a manager has to be a horrible person to find that a bit of a problem and maybe want to dodge it. So what are we doing are we able to do anything to help those folks?
So really good point as usual, Pam. You know, I guess my starting point in response would be that, again, I'll point to the deputies and what that they have said, and what I truly feel that they believe is traditionally the department has focused on the what and not so much on the how. And the deputies are really saying we need to move that needle over to the more towards the how and less so towards the what. So that's the starting point, and that's a good starting point to plant that tree, if you will, now. But it will take time, and with I also know that the training angle is also very important, and the deputies are very attuned to how we leverage CFSI and the School of Public Service as well to build people's competencies more on the how rather than the what. And we provide some of our own training modules as well that can support that, and hopefully as we onboard more resources, we'll be able to build that out some more. So a little bit of a nebulous answer, I'm afraid. You know, there's a way to go on this, but maybe I can turn to Danielle and Alain again, who may want to add a little bit more substance to what I admit is a bit of a fluffy answer, frankly.
A bit of a fluffy question from me as my part of that. So, yeah.
Well, I could have a quick answer. Well, it's not a quick answer, but I'll try to make it quick. Dans l'idée d'avoir une stratégie sur la santé et sécurité psychologique en milieu de travail, c'est en grande partie pour faire de sorte que la question de santé et sécurité psychologique soit prise au même niveau que la santé physique. Et la question de la santé, c'est occupational health and safety. When you think of that, you're thinking about physical health and safety. And we see that as a departmental responsibility. Like it is for them to make sure that I have a safe environment. It's for them to do so that we have masks available at the door, things like that. When we talk about psychological health, it's always been seen as the human being's responsibility, the individual's responsibility, or the manager's responsibility. But no, there's a responsibility for the department to put things in place to do so that we are in a safe. And it is to enable managers to better manage people and to have the tools to do that, but also for individuals to have the tools to be able to deal with the situations that they're. It's also supporting the teams to do so that they are creating healthy environments, to do so that, well, it's not all in the manager's hands to do so that their team is okay, but it's also the programs to do so. We're talking about preparing people to go on hardship missions. Well, that's a departmental, that's the program's responsibility to do so that the people have the tools, that people have the resources, things like that. But it's also, again, like for health and safety, to look at the situation of the department as being as important on the psychological element and the physical, and to put in place structures and things to do so that we're going to be safe and healthy. So that's where we're trying to go with this occupational health and safety strategy, and our champions are there to push on those things. But I think we have to be careful in putting the onus on the manager's capacity to deal with those situations, or even worse, from my side, to look at things in terms of, well, if things go bad, please call the EAP. It's not,
yes.
we have to go further than that.
I saw you guys were like bedbug reassurance, the first line of bedbug reassurance at one point, and I was like, okay. It's like,
yeah,
as assigned.
Yeah, we're there to support, but worried about climate change, call EAP. We need to be careful, a little bit careful on that front. I do want to, Alain, thank you so much for pointing to all the work that's going on the psychological health and safety strategy and how we're trying to push that as well. I also want to, I should have flagged as well that one of the live issues that is being discussed in the executive cadre is workload management. And you've heard some of this in some of the blog. So I think it's important for the membership here to advocate that, okay, workload management, it's not just about the files, it's about managing people too. So senior management, when you talk about workload management, you have to factor this in. Like you're saying, okay, manage performance. Okay, that's part of my job as a manager, is to manage my people and to take care of my people. It's not just about getting the memo up and getting the Treasury Board submission done and doing the QPs and et cetera. So senior management, you prioritize. You're telling us this is, the how is just as important as the what. Okay, so that needs to be factored into the workload management that we're working on here. So I think, Pam, your organization and your members need to continually remind management of that.
I agree with you, but I also there's all of these issues are so interlinked, right? And one of the things that I've noticed is when you have somebody who is promoted, say, to the EX level without having been like a frontline manager, deputy director, that's where I've seen sometimes problems where those people have never had the experience of being the one who translates the big ideas into hours of work, right? And like I have literally sat with somebody and where I've had buttons and I've said, okay, each button represents 2 hours of my staff time. So you've given me tasks that are going to require like 20 buttons, and I only have 10 buttons. So where do you want the buttons to go? And the person got mad at me, but it made the point, that like you don't have an infinite number. You can do anything, but you can't do everything. But what I would like to see is when they promote people, recognize like what gaps might be in somebody's experience and training, and make sure, give that person a course on how you do that, or make that person aware that this might be something that they need to think about. Because this culture of, just make it happen no matter what, it's really, it's not serving us very well as humans, first of all, but also as an institution. Like, is it really the best use of global affairs that you can produce a briefing note drawn from Wikipedia on like whatever random topic in 2 hours notice because somebody's woken up and realized that they're going to a meeting? Is that really what we want to be using our smart people for? Maybe that person should ask their assistant to cruise the web and get their, pull off their talking points rather than involve 10 people in a system in doing something like that. Like just a random thought, Sorry, Rob. I'm like, I see the like, yes, Pam. Okay.
No, it's fine. I take your point absolutely, and I agree with it. There's we can, it's another conversation, but it goes to the level of security or insecurity, need to shine, kind of dynamics for managers.
Exactly. So listen, I'm going to go to Lori and I'll allow her to talk. And then if nobody else, I'll give everybody else a last chance as we're chatting to do a last question if there's something that you want. And then when we wrap up, I will answer the question addressed to me about our negotiations. So Lori, I'm going to allow you to, how do I do this? Sorry, I want to, used to say, allow to speak. Okay, there we go. Lori, you have the power of speech. Are you there? Oh, I'm not hearing anything. So maybe she's given up and gone on. Lori, if you hear this, you're welcome to type your question into the chat or the Q&A, and we can. Go ahead.
You're on mute, Lori.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Hello?
Yeah.
Oh, hi.
Go ahead.
Sorry about that. I had to step out for a little bit, so I hope this wasn't covered, but I used to work in inspection, Rob, and you and I trained together many years ago, and hello, Danielle and Mark, and I did about 50 mission inspections over 2 assignments of 7 years. And one of the things that strikes me is what I'll call selection. The people that we bring into the department, and secondly, the people that we put out in the field. And I'll concentrate on missions. I know that there's issues in headquarters as well, but in missions, they become more acute because the effect on others is quite dramatic. In the 50 inspections I did, I saw so many people that were ill-fitted to probably the work, ill-fitted to being a manager, ill-fitted to being out in the field, and the negative impact that they had on the mission was phenomenal sometimes. And the managers in the mission, including the head of mission, are really saddled with a problem then, that unless there's something egregious, they have to find a way to live with it because they can't get them out of there. And so I hear you talking about training. Training is marvelous, but training doesn't make a manager necessarily. It requires other skills, and it isn't just managers. Sometimes it's just colleagues who are maybe managing LES and not doing a great job at it, or just interacting with other Canadians and LES in the mission. And I've seen how much damage they can do in a mission. So my point is about selection and some way that we can be sure, we can never be sure, that we can be surer that the people that we're putting out there really do have the skills and the competencies to be able to go into a mission and roll with it and not cause more damage, to add to the mission rather than taking away from it. And I'm really showing my age here, but many, many, many years ago when I was recruited, we had to go through psychological testing. Now, it was a bit bogus, I'll give you that. I actually walked out of mine at a certain point. But there's got to be something that we can do, because I know Rob and Danielle and Alain, you're probably dealing with tons of people out in the field or managers that are having problems with a staff member and they need guidance, or a staff member is having trouble because they're out in the mission and ill-equipped to handle it. Thank you.
Thanks. It's interesting. This is something that's come up for us with PAFSO, and that, we've actually been advocating for in PAFSO, is that I think we really need to have a good look at what the requirements are psychologically and otherwise. Oh, I see poor Danielle has to go. So thank you, Danielle. And we really appreciate you joining us. Do you want to say anything before you go? No?
Thank you again for the invitation. And I'm available if you'd like to continue the discussion at a later date.
I think it would be useful maybe to have another round of this if we could. Okay. I think we're getting some good questions and good comments out. So we'll follow up for sure. Okay. But thanks and see you soon.
Yes.
But, one of the things that we have actually been advocating for at PAFSO, which might surprise people a little bit, is a real attention to the bona fide requirements of the Foreign Service, of rotationality, and also of serving abroad. And, serving abroad in particular missions sometimes, right? Like, there are different levels of difficulty that are not always obvious. Like years ago, I don't know if it's still the same, but years ago, we used to have more people asking to be repatriated from Nordic countries and consulates in the US than anywhere else, because they're, in a hardship post, especially if there's language issues and so on, there's a sense of community, right? People kind of look after each other and, make sure that, somebody is not totally alone, like their first couple of weekends, at least in the mission, if they don't want to be. And in places where, the infrastructure is similar to ours, and language is not an issue, in most of those places, because, even in Sweden, most people speak English or whatever. There isn't that. And some people find those like really, really difficult. And, when I talk to our labor relations people, a significant number of the things that we see often go back, like there's always two sides to a story, right? And, I hear some of the stories and I think, okay, yeah, your manager may have crossed a line there, but, it's not a one-sided thing. And some people just lack awareness. Everyone thinks that they're the ones, that they're behaving perfectly, and sometimes I hear these stories and I think like, this is where the informal discussion, if the person is open to it, would benefit. But a lot of times those are the people who are not able or willing to see a side. So we would actually like to see, for everyone's benefit, stronger assessments and criteria of people, you know, for their suitability to go, you know, to join the Foreign Service and be rotational, and, you know, also for, you know, different types of missions. So sorry, I don't mean to take time from our talk over our guests, but PAFSO is aware of this.
Thanks, Pam. And yeah, I think, again, a systemic issue made more acute over the last several years by lack of systemic regular hiring as well. And so, you know, kind of plugging multiple holes in our mission network. So hopefully with the hiring, the new hiring that's going on for FS, that will help in some way. I also agree in terms of psychological requirements and suitabilities. You know, even the most, if you will, innocuous postings bring with them a measure of culture shock. And you never know what's going to happen. I mean, I served in the US, arrived August 2001. And, yeah, you know, stuff happens, and the environment changed and became one of the most stressful in the world for a while. My kids couldn't go to the pumpkin patch because of fears of a terrorist incident at Thanksgiving. So, you know, for our part, what I can speak to is our role in that, and trying to, with our own investments, bolster resilience for people before they go out on posting. No matter, you know, we've said we're focused on the hardship missions, but more broadly as well. And hopefully that'll help contribute to a broader approach and more preparation before people go out. So I'm afraid I don't have, there's a need there. I'm certainly not going to dispute that. Alain, veux-tu ajouter quelque chose là-dessus?
The only, I like considering myself as a psychometric specialist, like it's part of my studies were on that, and that will never be enough. And you could have some very poor scores on whatever test you're going to be doing, and you're going to be doing great there. So we have to do more. For sure, we have to do something. We have to better prepare people. We have to better integrate people that we haven't talked about. I think we have to have a better view of how things are going, and develop the people's capacity to raise things when things happen, so that, and the capacity to react to that. I think it's probably much more efforts, but probably more valid but we do have to put more efforts in selecting people and preparing people to go there and to manage people, mostly on the management side, to make sure that they're capable of managing and accountable for managing people correctly.
Care about managing. You know, like actually care about having a healthy team, and you know, as opposed to just like, I'm gonna go there and I'm gonna look great and I'm gonna like swan around, and you know, people are gonna do what I say because I'm in a management position. I mean, there are not too many of those, to be fair. You know, they're really, in my experience, they're not. They're not. I mean, some people have elements of that, but it's not entirely that. You know. Yeah. Well, I mean, maybe
I have to leave as well. I have somebody.
Okay. Yeah. No. Well, we've gone almost 45 minutes above our thing, so I was just going to say, I think that's maybe a good note to end on. That we, you know, that we recognize, and I think that we all need, as you know, as employer and employees, we do need to recognize that all of this stuff is a two-way street, right? That if you do have something going on that chances are it's not like 100%, you know, somebody else being a great big meanie, you know, but it's also, you know, we need to be willing to recognize when people bring these things forward to ourselves. And, you know, psychological health and safety, like occupational health and safety, the bigger thing is not just a management responsibility. It's a shared union and management, like at the legislative level, and, you know, employee and management situations. So, you know, I would really like to see us talk about what we can do training wise and culture wise, and, you know, to kind of start moving some of these big issues. And I think you guys are very, you know, well placed now with the establishment of this office to help us go forward on that. So thank you. And thanks for taking all the time. Merci beaucoup.
Thanks for having us, Pam. It's a great opportunity, and look forward to doing it again soon.
Yes, I'll definitely follow up. I think this is really going to be worth having something, having another session if you guys are willing.
Absolutely.
Excellent. Okay, so thank you very much, and I'll see you all soon.
See you and see you again, Lori.
Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.